Good evening, everybody, and welcome back, my friends. I'm T.S. This is the simulcast, up and running now for the 9th of March, 1995. And on paper, this one looks terrific, but you never know. Gary Busey is here tonight with a new effort called The History of Rock and Roll, which is now running on television in syndication. Tina Sinatra is here tonight with a brand new CBS motion picture, and Ellen Goodman, the hysterically funny and wildly perceptive columnist who appears in newspapers all across America, joining us on tonight's Colorcast from CBS in Burbank, California. May I clear my throat, please? Of course you may. Thank you. You know, I've had some fun here talking about our showstoppers here at CBS. Who can forget the night when we had the two mail delivery people back there with Frank Field in New York in their shorts? I mean, and the memorable night we had the Birdman of Manhattan back there with the live cat box on TV. And I was thinking back over other showstoppers I've done in other venues in my checkered career. And Michael Horowitz, my producer here, was with me the night I launched on WABC TV the legendary 11 o'clock Eyewitness News. We used to run a little thing on that show. On the screen it said, "There's nothing wrong with your set," because opening night, they're all in the newsroom there. That'd be Michael Horowitz, the producer of the news, and Bill Fife, the general manager of WABC, who is now chasing pets in Palm Springs. And Cliff Abramats, the news director, and they're going over this list of stories because, I'm coming off the NBC network, and they want to put stories on the air that they believe will grab the attention of the television viewer in New York City. So about 10 o'clock, they come out of the news director's office in the seance in there, and they sacrificed a chicken, and they they came out and they said, the lead story is a pet store in Queens. I said, what happened there? They said, well, the fellow left and locked up the pet store, and he turned off the air conditioning, and all the snakes and gerbils are dead. I said, you have got to be, oh, no, this is a great, great story. So here is Snyder going on in New York television saying, dead snakes and gerbils, film at 11. I knew then that gig was not going to last long, and I was correct. Anyway, to show you the power of the Colorcast here at CBS, last night we put this fellow on, whose name I've long since forgotten, who was up there, I beg your pardon? Harold Carver. How could I forget that name? He was the gentleman whose house was in danger as the mountain was collapsing up there in Ventura County. And we did a very short interview with him as a showstopper at the beginning of last night's program. And lo and behold, I'm driving home last night here, and I'm listening to the CBS radio news at midnight, which would be at 3 o'clock in the morning, New York time, the live feed. And newscaster Bill Fitka, good evening, this is CBS News New York. My name is Bill Fitka. Here now the news. And right at the top of the program, one of the first stories, this is what I hear. Listen to this.
Storms last weekend set off rock and mudslides that displaced hundreds of people, but not Harold Carver, who lives in Pico Rivera, right next to a mountain of mud.
I'm concerned about it. I'm very much concerned about it, but I'm not going to let it wipe me out. Next month I'm going to be 80 years old, and I'm not going to let it worry me to death.
Carver spoke to the Late Late Show with Tom Snyder. A flash flood watch has also been issued for the San Francisco Bay Area.
Now, I know it was a slow news day, but still, to lead the CBS Evening News at 3 o'clock in the morning, I think is pretty spiffy. I want to tell you about one of my co-workers here, but I'm running short on time and I have a very long show. But it's the story of Connie Patzelis. Remind me about this tomorrow night, one of our staff members, who dropped her keys through a crack in the elevator door last night, and they went all the way to the bottom of the elevator pit. I guess I've told the story. The slot is this wide, and she's got a key ring like that, never touched a piece of metal all the way through. They were here till 12:30 trying to get the elevator up high enough for somebody to go under and get the keys. And they got the elevator up, but then nobody wanted to go down and get the keys. So she's wandering the streets of Paso Robles tonight. What can I... Back with Gary Busey and your phone calls on the toll-free highway. I'm Tom. This is the simulcast. Settle back and watch the pictures as they fly through the air. Thanks for watching, everybody. Didn't I hear him say that Harold Carver on the radio lived in Pico Rivera?
Correct.
No, he lives in La Conchita, yeah. Probably a reason this guy's working at 3 o'clock in the morning. No. It was the writers. Gary Busey is the rarest of actors, a man who brings honesty and intensity to almost every role he plays. He is also a lifelong rock and roll fan and the narrator of a new 10-hour documentary that could be the definitive history of rock and roll in America called The History of Rock and Roll. Welcome to this program. We are enormous fans of yours here, and we are delighted that you're here. And the rock and roll history program that you've done, in my view, has not received the amount of publicity it should, because to tell you the truth, I've seen very little in the way of advertising and promotion for the history of rock and roll. This is in syndication, is that correct?
Yes.
It's not on a television network like CBS or NBC.
No, syndication, and I was told I would be doing a lot of it, and this is the first.
The first interview you've done?
Yes.
In your view, where does the history of rock and roll begin? Is it top 40 radio in the 50s, or is it before that in R&B?
I think it's a mixture. In fact, I can tell you a story about how it started.
Okay.
Back in the 50s, there was these minstrel shows in the South that would come through, and it was black people playing rhythm and blues.
Sure.
They would have a nice show, and then when the kids would go to bed, you'd pay a little extra money, and it would get hotter. It would get hotter. And there was race music stations and race music stores where you had your black music. Mm-hmm. Now, Buddy Holly would listen to the Louisiana Hayride and hear Little Richard. Little Richard played piano. Like this, so Holly was da-da-da-da-da, downbeats, all of that. Now, Buddy went to see the Searchers. Every 15 minutes, John Wayne would say, "That'll be the day, Pilgrim." So Buddy goes home and writes a song, "That'll be the day."
Yeah. That's how that one came about, huh?
Yeah. And they went to Clovis, New Mexico and cut the record with Norman Petty for $3.50 and mailed it to Alan Freed, and he booked the group on an all-black tour, started at the Apollo Theater. The group, of course, was white. They went to the Apollo Theater, first white group to play rock and roll. They were booed 2 nights. And Buddy said, "We're going to have to do something to fit in, so we're going to do that Bo Diddley beat song, and we're going to tell them what we're going to do." And I said, "What is that?" "Not Fade Away." So they played Not Fade Away, and they were accepted. They went on the tour. When they got to Birmingham, the radio stations were put back in business because of rock and roll.
Oh, no question
had a lot
about
to do with it.
No question. As I told you, as a young man, my first job in broadcasting was for the legendary Gordon McClendon, who operated KLIF in Dallas.
Cliff, yes.
And he bought a station in Milwaukee, and I worked there in the news. And they had a fellow who came on at 10 o'clock every night now in Milwaukee in 1955, Gary, and he played race music, R&B on the radio, and it just
exciting,
it electrified the city. I mean, all of a sudden, we were hearing things.
It was dangerous.
Yeah.
It was dangerous.
It was dangerous, but it was also exciting, and it was good.
Well, what happened then was the white kids down there wanted to hear the Crickets. Well, you can't take a white faction and show up at a black function. It was against the law then.
That's right.
So there was, okay, let's put Holly on first in the Crickets. J.I., Joe B, and Buddy, put them on first, have them do 3 songs, get them out of here. They drew a rope down the center of the stadium. Put the white kids on one side and the black kids on the other. And they're playing their songs. And the white kids are clapping on the 1 and the 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the black kids are clapping on 1, 2, 3, 4. They're driving it. So J.I. said, "Boy, it was just whack, 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 whack." I said, "Well, they got it. They're on something here."
Yep. No
they got in
question
the truck,
about it.
they got in the bus and went off, and that was it.
Also,
it started growing.
It was interesting, you know, the first person to sing Tutti Frutti on WRIT in Milwaukee was not Little Richard. It was Pat Boone, who covered the song.
Tutti Frutti.
Yeah.
Oh, Rudy. That was very good.
But, I mean, let's not blame Pat Boone for this, because it was the record people who said white America will not listen to Little Richard. Yeah. And how wrong they were, because WRIT and McClendon said, "Hey, put Little Richard on." And it was #1 in Milwaukee within days after its appearance on the radio.
You remember in the beginning of rock and roll in the South, rock and roll has got to go. Whap, they were breaking the record. They were scared. It was frightening. But it's so exciting. When you're 13 and 14 a year.
It was
we would hear All Shook Up coming out of the garage of the neighborhood bully. And gosh, you don't go near the neighborhood bully when he's working on his Ford, and you're boing, let's go. We'd run down and stand by the garage and listen. 2 minutes and 10 seconds, we were frozen in space. But when the song was over, okay, let's go.
I remember the first time we played Fats Domino on Blueberry Hill, and later I'm Walking. and people called up and they said, "Who is this guy?" I mean, they were electrified by these performances. So I guess in the names that you've mentioned here, these were your heroes growing up as a kid in rock and roll, right?
They were like leaders of a new cause of excitement and energy. It was like, my gosh, how much is that dog in window? It was, can't really bop to that. I'm going to tell you. The one was the one we You know, then we heard All Shook Up and Rip It Up and Rock Around the Clock, and then you had the Drifters and the Platters.
Then there was a guy we used to play, an enormous man of stature, Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
Yeah.
You cast a spell on me, or I cast a spell on you. I forget who cast, but this, I mean, just the name Screamin' Jay Hawkins gives you the idea of what this man did. I mean, you know, and people stood.
Lightning Hawkins.
Yeah.
Muddy Waters. I could talk about this for hours. How long does this show last?
It doesn't last.
Let's promote this thing. Let's get the cameras and go down the street and start talking about it.
Do we have a little piece of the videotape of the rock and roll, the history of rock and roll that we could run? Why don't we run that here rather than talking about it and give the folks an idea of what you're missing if you do not see this program? Let's go to the videotape. Pick it up right here.
My Lord, all of my kisses, you don't know what you've been. I bet you know, boy, when you're with me, oh boy, I thought my world could see that you was a miss.
When you played him in the movie, this had to be a dream come true for you. Something had to close here, some kind of closure.
It was, yes, it was, and it was pretty breathtaking. It was so awesome that I couldn't really define it as it was happening. I'd done 5 movies in a row then, and by the time I got to the curly hair, the black hair, the funny clothes, guitar, and the glasses, and I couldn't find Gary Busey in the mirror. And that was good, because I wasn't there to get my way, and the joy was singing the songs. And if I had stopped and thought about what I was doing, I would have probably hit some breaks. But I didn't do that, and it was a beautiful thing that happened.
What does that mean? I looked in the mirror, and I couldn't find Gary Busey, so I couldn't get in my way. That's a great line.
Well, thank you, sir. What that means is I wasn't there to judge myself, because I saw myself change in 5 positions, 5 movies. Gumball, Riding Stars, Born, Straight Time, Big Wednesday, and Holly. And by the time that got there, I got out of the water in Hawaii, tan and curly blonde hair and surfing, and came back. I felt like a funny little rodent, but I wasn't that. But I was sure, and I didn't think at all, Tom.
You were
I
buddy
didn't think
in
at
that
all.
picture, pal. You were
Most
buddy.
of the Steve Rash was the director, Freddie Bauer, Ed Torn. Those guys had worked on that picture for 4 years getting it ready. And it was like precision time. And when they said, yeah, we're going to find a guy that can sing it, I went, oh, good luck, I'm double parked, I'll see you. You know, it was a beautiful moment.
Anyway, you were Buddy Holly in that picture, pal. No question about it. I have to pause here for commercials. Back with Gary Busey and all of you on the toll-free line. You know it, you love it, you call it. I don't remember it, but I mean, if it's not up there, I don't say it. 1-800-95-CBS-TV. Now this break. My guest tonight is Gary Busey, who is the narrator of the history of rock and roll, now in syndication in television around the country. And I'm afraid you're going to have to look for this. I have not seen it on a television station in Los Angeles.
We'll look for it. Because
I'm going to look for it. In fact, I'm going to call up and demand that they put this thing on, because as much as I like primetime sitcoms, this was my introduction to broadcasting. This was all of us who are 50 years old. This was the beginning of our lives.
When you see it in the beginning sequence, the first 5 shows is like your mouth breathing. Your mouth breathing, watching what's happening to the kids and what's happening to the...
Let's go to the fans on the phones. Here is Ken in Atlanta, Georgia. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Ken. Thanks for calling us tonight, and say hi to Gary. He's right here.
Hey, Gary, how are you?
I'm fine, Ken. Thank you very much.
You know, Tom, you're right. I saw the guitarist episode of the History of Rock and Roll tonight, and I actually picked it up about 20 minutes into it because I didn't know it was on.
Yeah.
And thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really wonderfully done. There was a great quote by a thing where I guess Pete Townsend dragged Jimmy Page down to a theater in London and made him told him that there was a guy that was going to put him out of business, which I guess was Jimi Hendrix, which was great. But Gary, I wanted to ask you a question. I know before you got into acting that you were in a band. I know this because I once found the record in a used record bin, and I saw you on the back cover, and I didn't know about it before then. I wanted to know what that experience was like and how it compares to what you're doing now.
How does it compare? Music is so fresh, and it's a very high artistic expression. It's inner joy doing music. When you do films, you do a little scene, you wait for hours, you do a little scene, you're on the stage rock and roll. It's right there in the heart of the matter. You see people really moved by it. It's incredible. It compares, but not the same way. It's like oxymoron, sweet and sour.
Ken, we're glad. Ken, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, do you miss performing musically?
I'm doing some music now. I'm writing. I'm putting things together I've been playing music all along. After Buddy Holly, I got on stage with anybody. It gave me that license. They would invite me. I wouldn't just run up and say, here's music.
You bought Holly's guitar, didn't you?
Yes. You pick that up and strum it. It fits. People step back.
I'd be afraid to pick it up and strum it for fear I'd break it somehow.
Oh, you wouldn't break it. It's strong.
Okay, good. Ken, we're glad you called. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, good night, sir.
Good night.
In 1989, you messed yourself up pretty bad with a motorcycle accident.
1988, December 4th.
Tough time for you. Difficult time.
I didn't feel anything when I left. The last thing I remember was the top of the arc. I hit the curb going 45 miles an hour. I learned from this that the great tragedy in life is not death. It's what dies inside you while you're living. Because you just don't feel a thing. And when I came back, I went over there on the other side and had an experience. And I came
Out of body?
Yes, out of body. And I was given some information, and it's quite valuable. And each day it grows. I have become. It's not the new me; it's the real me. It's letting go of a lot of fears.
What is the piece of information? Do you share that with people, or is that something between you and yourself?
I can share it with people. It has to do with self-acceptance and what you're doing is fine, and the consideration of others, and the acknowledgement of the truth, especially consideration of others. That's what I had a hard time doing because I was so afraid of failing. And I have the energy of a lot of things, and naturally I do. So I would drive through people. I've never been in a fight in my life, but I would be able to use words and my aggression and my behavior, and it wasn't very fun to work with. And when I turned 50 years old, I laid down 50 cards on the table, and each card represented a year of my life. And I went through those cards, and I accepted the stuff that was hard for me, the stuff that I failed in, or failing, F-A-I-L-I-N-G, finding an important lesson, inviting needed growth. Okay, I looked at those, and I said, thank you very much. And I saluted it, and okay. One thing I didn't do, and that's I didn't look at my behavior to others. That caught me about 3 months later. I went, whoa, I must look at myself in my situation. I've got to think again about the magic and specialty of other people. That's really a gift you're giving. You're being given when those folks come up to you.
Would you call that, in addition to all that you've just said with some eloquence, would you call that mellowing? That acceptance of yourself that you talked about? You know, people ask us as we get older, have we mellowed?
I think mellow is a bad word. No, it's not a bad word. Mellow is mellow. What does it say? What does Webster say it is? I just heard it. Donovan had a song, Mellow Yella. Didn't make much sense to me. To me, it's like learning to balance my internal energy with my environment and don't take everything. So I got upset because I didn't have anything to complain about for a while. I need to fix something. That's not the way it is. Self-containment. Pull your energy back and let others exist. I had no idea that I wasn't let others exist, even though I wasn't talking. I had a way about me that would shut people down. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know it at the time. But when I found it out, there was a lot of tears. There was a lot of... And the knowledge of that is... I cheered over that. It's a good feeling.
Stacy, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Hi.
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 Tom, we watch you every night, and we love the show.
Appreciate that. Say hi to Gary Busey now, and quick question. He's right here.
Okay. Hi, Gary.
Hello, Stacy.
How did you like starring in the Lethal Weapon movie and Silver Bullet movies?
Oh, I liked them fine. It's quite a bold excursion from my natural self. I didn't know what that platinum hair would do to my character. And I couldn't even laugh. I didn't smile once in that movie, except once when I realized that Mel and I were chasing each other down the freeway, shooting at each other with blanks. That was funny. So I laughed, but that was the only time. Yeah. Plus, you're working with great people. In Silver Bullet, I weighed 240 pounds. And that's 24 years of making movies. I got paid $556 for fighting that werewolf.
Good Lord.
Exactly. It threw me around that room. I bounced around like a cue ball.
Yeah, I could tell. It really tore you up pretty good.
Yeah, I had some bruises, but I was proud of them.
Thanks for calling, Stacey.
Thanks, Stacey.
All right, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming on tonight, my new friend, and I wish you all success. And
Thanks,
I'm going to start a one-man crusade here to get this program notoriety and get it put on so we can see it here in L.A.
I'll be at your house tomorrow at 5 a.m. We'll go out together. Okay?
Oh, no, we're not. The picture's called The History of Rock and Roll, a 10-parter in syndication now on TV. Look for it and the listings in your local papers. Back with Tina Sinatra after these messages. Gary, thanks a million.
Hey.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. Good. Tomorrow night here we have Sparky Anderson from the Detroit Tigers. We have Rita Rudner, my friend, and the channeler J.Z. Knight, who will channel for us right here on the stage. If your last name is Sinatra, you naturally get attention, but my next guest has made it work in her favor. Tina Sinatra is one of the town's most successful television producers. Her latest project is called Young at Heart. What are you laughing at? I'm giving you a great read here.
I liked it. You can. Yeah, that's okay.
It airs this Sunday at 9 p.m. on CBS, and thanks for coming over and welcome to our program.
I'm TS too, you know.
Yes, by the way, you are.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. You know, you were victimized here when this fellow was stalking you, and Robert Shapiro was your attorney, and I'm sure that experience gave you an insight into the American system of criminal justice that is something quite different from what we are now seeing in the trial of Mr. Simpson here in Southern California. What was that whole thing like in terms of what you learned about the American legal and criminal justice system?
I can tell you what I felt.
Okay.
What I experienced was I was like a boil that they would want to just break and get rid of. Lance and get rid of you. The dockets are busy. The courtrooms are packed. The commissioners, I was at a level to begin with in the course of events where they feel that you're in the way. They make you feel ridiculous. They allow the defense attorneys to, I'm talking about myself.
I understand.
My situation. They allow the defense attorneys to maneuver and manipulate. They don't tell the truth. They don't play a fair game. And I'm dealing with the LA police and the threat management unit specifically, and the DA's office, who are walking that fine line of justice, and they do it with great compassion for him as well as for me.
Mm-hmm.
Had I had a wound, some evidence to show some bodily harm, I think they would have treated me with more respect. I found it very ugly.
Was the feeling that you're talking about here, and if I'm reading you completely wrong, just go ahead and tell me, is that, you know, here is Tina Sinatra, and she's fine, she's not hurt, and we've got this case, and I mean, so this guy followed around, let's just get this thing out of the way so we can get out of something. Is that what I'm getting from
More
you?
or less, yes,
Yeah.
but the facts were greater than that. There was real fear. The next thing that could have happened to me could have been death. And I quite honestly believed it to such an extent that my life was so altered that there was no existence for me. I needed help. The court did not embrace me. And it's Bob Shapiro who warned me, the DA warned me, everybody warned me, you're not going to come in here and get a lot of...
sympathy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that you won't find them necessarily on your side because you've been stalked. And what about the press in that whole affair?
That was the most difficult part
As I recall,
for me.
there was a good deal of press on that, obviously, because of your last name, yeah.
I was more or less under a gag order. Just advised to take the high road, not to say anything to anyone. And I called 911 at one point, and he called the National Enquirer. So already he made it miserable for me.
Yeah.
That was the threat. But I had to do what I had to do. But once I filed a restraining order, he held a press conference and said she'd never lie, but it must be somebody else. It's not me. And I have to tell you something. He went on a lot of shows at the time, too, and I think people were believing him.
I recall that.
And I could say nothing.
Let me talk to you here about some happier times in your life, and that is the making of the picture Young at Heart, which is set in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Yes.
Which has a connection to the Sinatra name and family, yet the picture's made in Toronto. Now, why is that?
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
One of the reviews today said it looked like Toronto, too.
Yeah, it's funny all the towns that Toronto is on television these days. You have no idea how much is done in Toronto and how little is done in Hoboken.
People don't know.
It's money, huh?
The Vancouver's for the West Coast and Toronto's for the East Coast. It's money. It's all money. Warner Brothers has a very good relation with Canada, the entire country, and it just made more sense. It was more practical. And we got the best crew and the best cast.
Olympia Dukakis, by the way, is
But I'm talking just the Canadian entities. They were all so good and so professional that it was one of the great joys of my life. I mean, I had a great time.
As a matter of fact, we have a little snippet here of this program called Young at Heart. Frank Sinatra appears towards the end of the picture, and I believe the scene we have presently up and running is featuring Olympia Dukakis. So we'll take a look at Young at Heart.
I'm not the man I used to be, Rose, but sometimes, like right now, I look at you and I want you like I did when I was 25.
You have a head start.
What about Mass?
We'll go to 11:30 Mass.
What a wonderful line. Yeah, especially from a lady, because usually they would say, no, we're going to Mass at 9 o'clock.
They're really married, husband and wife, you know.
I know. That's very, very sweet. Now, the soundtrack, I heard Frank's voice in the background. It's all Sinatra music in this, or mostly, is it not?
It's about 15 masters. We have some other music as well, more contemporary recordings, but it's the tool used that he communicates to her after the loss of Louis, of Joe, her husband. And she feels worthless and has no direction anymore. And she feels guided by this voice. And it's a happy ending.
So many of us do, you know.
Yeah. But she really hears them.
Your brother was here about, a month ago. And
I saw him.
We talked about your dad, you know, and he said to me, and I thought it was very touching, that it's tough for anybody to watch your dad get old. How's that for you?
God, I feel the same way about myself. He's in very good health. He probably will not be on the road anymore by choice. I think he's done it long enough.
Hey, Frank, you did it good.
Yeah.
You did it well.
I think that the effects of hearing loss and the eyesight started to go as well, you know. He had cataract surgery, which was pretty successful, but it's time. He'll be 80 in December. We want him home. That's what we want.
Terrific.
We want him
By
home.
the way, what is all this with Shirley MacLaine now? I'm not going to go into chapter and verse, but I mean, they were best friends, Shirley MacLaine, Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford.
I guess if you want to choose to write your own biography and you delete these icons, you leave big holes in their story, but she had such a rare, what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean. She was given the gift of their company. I mean,
and their friendship.
Their friendship. She was so close for so long that you would have thought that, you know, out of loyalty, that don't write the book.
I love Mr. Sinatra's response. You know, what some broads won't do for a buck.
I heard that's what he said. Speaking of, I want to give you one of our new ties.
Thank you.
You'll see that it's our new Frank Sinatra neckwear.
Wow.
And his name is all across the lining as well. And
nice.
will be available in the stores in the next
I will wear it here with great pride, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
And by the way,
much.
knowing that your father made that quote, I know he's fine.
Yes, I promise you he's fine.
We'll all be watching this picture on CBS, and
Please.
Thanks for joining us tonight. My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Tina Sinatra, folks. Coming up, the columnist Ellen Goodman, and more of you on the toll-free exchange right after these messages. Wow, Sinatra. I am not ready. I got all this stuff here. Hey, they might as well see what goes on here.
Can't do that without your union card.
Oh, yeah. I don't have a union card. I got a TS card. See if I weren't on TV this... There. Just dip to black and come up on me again. Go ahead. Feel like it never happened. Ellen Goodman is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist whose syndicated column for the Boston Globe appears in more than 400 papers around the country. Her common sense on complex issues has made her one of the most popular writers around, and we are pleased to welcome her here tonight. I read a piece that you did for your syndicate back in January on how much you wished you could be on the O.J. Simpson jury. Remember that one?
That's right. My theory was if I could only be sequestered, I'd get away from it a certain number of hours. You know, I'd only be forced to witness it 8 hours a day. I was getting O.J. aversive.
Well, you think about it, these people are sequestered after about 5 or 6 hours in the courtroom.
That's right. Leaving the rest of us.
Yeah, and the rest of us, it goes on and on and on and on, and they get to watch Walt Disney pictures and movies on television and the American movie classics while we're watching analysis of what happened while witnesses were on the stand. It's never
we're
ending.
watching analysis of the analysts.
And does this run all over the country all day long? You know, here in L.A., it's on almost 24 hours a day. And, you know, we wonder if back east, if the stations carry as much of it as we get here in California. I suspect not.
Well, probably not as much. But I went surfing through, you know, we've got like 100 channels or something. And I remember doing one 10-minute surf during which out of, say, the 58 channels or whatever it was that were on, O.J. was on, his face was on, like 14 of them simultaneously, or as simultaneously as you can get your finger to move.
And what about the injection here of Marcia Clark's personal life into this trial? You write often about the angst of men and women in these trying times. What about this Marcia Clark story and her child custody battle being made almost a part of the O.J. Simpson trial?
Well, I've been traveling all week, and I must say that this case has really struck a chord because it's sort of like your basic working mother's nightmare. I mean, here is this woman who's in the most intense, high-profile moment of her career. She's trying to balance work and family, and one day she's got Johnny Cochran saying, oh, yeah, you really don't have to go home and take care of your kids. It's a ruse. And then the next day her husband is suing for custody because she isn't home enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really an extraordinary example of the kind of double bind that you get into.
Except, I had a caller on radio last night where we were talking about this very thing, and I said, whatever the battle between Mr. and Mrs. Clark, or he and she here, if they've changed names, his timing is atrocious.
His timing is deliberate.
Of course it's deliberate, but it's also atrocious.
Yeah.
I mean, a reasonable person would say, look, until the trial is over, let's just try and keep this going as best we can for the sake of our kids, and then when you're through with this, we can get on with the business of our lives.
Oh, sure.
Now, you talk about women in the workplace, and I'd like to ask you here how you think men and women see work differently. We see it one way, and you do see it a different way.
Well, let's not make a class action out of it.
Okay, all right, okay.
I do think that women generally see work as a piece of their life and have a sense of a life as a whole. And men often see or identify themselves much more closely with their work, where for women it's a piece of this. I mean, I think you've seen this in a lot of different ways.
Let me tell you what I noticed differently, and of course my industry was among the first to integrate sexually, because the stations that carry our programs are licensed by the government of the United States, and for obvious reasons we had to move in the direction of removing barriers to women in television. Women have brought to the workplace in television something that we as guys never brought to it when we were by ourselves. And that is a sense, as you say, of it being a part of life. All of a sudden, birthdays of staff members became very, very important. Families became important. Children were in the office all of a sudden. The office was nicer because there were flowers in the office. And all of a sudden, it was not so much about work, although that was there, but it was about the things in life that have nothing at all to do with work, but are a part of the everyday experience we call living. To me, that was the difference that women brought to it. And by the way, I think those are good differences.
Well,
I like those differences.
I like those differences, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in some ways women have humanized, you would say,
no question.
the workplace.
There's no question
but in another way, we're really having trouble humanizing the workplace. Because, I mean, if you live in an economy now where you have two options, you can be unemployed or you can be overemployed.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say for someone who doesn't just want to come and humanize the workplace at the workplace and have nice flowers at your office, but somebody who also wants to work a reasonable number of hours so that they can go home, have a family life, have a real life, be good to their children, be good to their parents? We haven't accomplished that piece.
And I don't think, and I don't know if you ever will, because I think that is part of the difference that makes us uniquely male and female. I think that men, our whole training is playing by rules and regulations. Our whole training comes out of military. Our whole training comes out of team experience on sports. And there, if the hours are a little too long, if the task is a little too dreary, we are taught as individuals not to complain about those things, but to carry out the task without complaint. And I think that's probably the reason it is the way you describe it as being.
Except that there is a generational difference. And I think a lot of younger men whose wives are working full-time are also thinking about their lives in new ways and trying to get home, too. Mm-hmm. It's just that they sometimes suffer even more repercussions. If you're a woman and you say, I'm only going to work a certain number of hours, I am trying to balance home and
6
family.
6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, whatever.
8 hours a day. There is some still sense of legitimacy. In fact, there's often a sense that, yes, you're doing what you should be doing. But if you're a man and you say, I want to go home and take care of my kids, you won't be considered seriously at all. You may suffer at least as great, if not a greater penalty.
Let me tell you a story out of my life. When I was a kid, my parents would often talk. My mom was a nurse at County General in Milwaukee, surgical nurse. And my dad would show up at 5 o'clock to pick her up after work, and she wouldn't get out of the hospital till 9 o'clock at night. And, my father would be ranting and raving, how can you be so late, blah, 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 blah. We had this date, it was before they were married. And she said, Frank, we have to sew him up. If you're a surgical nurse, sometimes occupation dictates. Okay? Let me pause here briefly for commercials. We are with columnist ENunn Goodman and all of you at 800-95-CBS-TV. Back after a short break, about 3 minutes.
Transcontinental Airline and Travel Service is the official travel service for the news.
Guests of the news stay at the Marriott Residence Inn. Tom.
Good evening, sir.
Pleasure talking to you again.
Thank you. Pleasure to be spoken to.
I talked to you on the old cable show, and I'm glad I reached you again.
Thank you.
My question to ENunn Goodman would be the news item, the story that hit the air today on NBC and CBS about the vandalism down in Florida. Teenagers apparently destructing property and videotaping it for no apparent reason except for kicks. Do you have any thoughts on like the society and is this indicative of the times or
These were the kids that went to somebody's house and just completely demolished it. Is that? Yeah, $100,000 worth of damage, and then videotape themselves doing it for kicks.
Right. I mean, that's probably what's new, that they actually videotape themselves doing it. I think if I can generalize from that case, that there's a lot of concern and real concern about kids being left alone, not enough adults in kids' lives of one kind or another, and going on one kind of a rampage or another. I think that's something that an awful lot of people are worried about.
Well, I think that this is a deplorable situation and a disgusting situation, and they ought to catch those kids and they ought to punish them with every measure of the law for what they did.
Oh, I certainly hope so too, and assume so.
I don't want to sit here and have to psychoanalyze these poor children and how they've been abused and mistreated and whatever, because that kind of behavior is just not proper. And it's not the kind of behavior that's exemplified by media, by peer groups, by counseling, by whatever. There's no justification anywhere for that kind of behavior. What do you make of it, JR? Let's get your take on it.
Well, Tom, I think in this day and age, they know that they really won't be punished, and if their parents do retaliate the old-fashioned way with the rod, spare the rod, spoil the child, they'll report them to the authorities. I feel that there's a complete breakdown, and these bored kids with no concept of morals or ethics, and I blame their parents for that, just feel that they can get away with it, and that...
How old were the kids that did this? Because I'm not up to speed on this story at all.
They look like between 15, 16, 17 years old.
So therefore they must have some idea of what's right and wrong, wouldn't you think? These aren't 12-year-old kids.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
they were videotaping themselves out of some
they knew what they were doing here.
Provocative, perverse press.
Of course.
These are kids from middle-class families where they probably were given the benefits of anything that they wanted. These are not urban poor kids, and I was watching a bit of...
Can you imagine if these kids lived in Singapore, what would be happening?
They'd have some sore backsides, wouldn't they?
They would never do this again, and there would be an example given to a lot of kids that you don't conduct yourself in this kind of a manner. JR, I'm glad you called. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, bye-bye. Victoria calling in Miami, Florida for ENunn Goodman. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Snyder. It's a pleasure
Good evening.
Talking to you. I know I have to be fast on this. Quick question. My mother has been a single parent for years, long before it was in vogue, and did not make the money that Marsha Clark makes, $90,000. What I do not understand is why they are focusing so on Clark as a single parent. Women have been doing this for years without the financial support this woman seems to have always managed to have a babysitter. Clark looked like such a fool, and before Judge Ito saying, Judge, I can't take care of my children, my babysitter. Women have learned to have alternates, take things ahead of time to plan for these things.
I know what you're saying, Victoria, and the reason that there's so much attention, and maybe Ellen will agree or disagree, is because she is Marsha Clark, and this is a high visibility case.
Yeah.
It's one more thing for the media vultures to fasten upon.
But it's so foolish, and it takes away from working women who are not in that position.
Let me just get Ellen's position on this, because we're very close to time.
Well, I don't think that I think she had made a deal about that she was going to go home that night, and then the deal was broken, so she was forced to talk about it in public. I mean, the pathetic thing is it's such a no-no to talk about your kids in the workplace because you're going to get punished for it in some fashion or other. That's really what is most offensive.
Victoria, we're glad you called.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for...
One quick thing. It's just
No, there's no more quick thing, Victoria. Thanks for calling Potter Down. Good night. My thanks to Ellen Goodman for joining us. She's seen in more than 400 papers around the country, but the mothership is the Boston Globe. Thanks, Ellen. We will continue, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude to people here, but folks, when the time is gone, guess what? The time is gone. We'll be right back. The time is gone. Tomorrow night we start drug testing. Drive safely on the way home. Sleep tight, North America, and thanks for watching, everybody. Good night now.